So
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about holding space. You just talked about that. You just brought it up. And I think it's a, for me, it's a powerful topic because it's the idea of being able to discern, like you said, like you can be with your feelings and notice them, but you hold space for the other person. So just talk a little bit more about that so people can get a sense of what that practice really is like. Yeah, in the moment, so to speak.
Um, yeah, and I would say that, it is important to practice it during the day and the day-to-day comings and goings, in order for it to be able to be present in any kind of crisis or anything that does come up. Because when
Good point.
we're really shaken,
Yeah.
tend to revert. I tend to revert back to old modeling, what my parents did, what I felt the culture teaches about that, or whatever. So to have a conscious presence in a real crisis of whatever kind, um, it's important, I think, to sort of practice it on the day-to-day level. And I just think that that's the only real way to do it, is to practice it on the day-to-day level, is to be aware of my feelings, be aware of my judgments, because there's feelings and then there's thoughts about those feelings, or something happens and there's thoughts about what happened, and then there's feelings that come out of that. If you think about it differently, your feelings will be different.
Absolutely.
So if something happens, somebody cuts you off on the road, um, and you decide that, well, when somebody cuts me off, it's really just angel's way. This is what I do. Angel's way of keeping me out of harm somewhere down the road.
Yeah.
So for some reason that works for me. So when people cut me off now in traffic, I think of it as a blessing,
Yeah.
versus the old paradigm,
Mhm.
being cut off going, you jerk, you creep, which is really focused outward, right? Has nothing to do with comforting or being taking care of myself.
Mhm.
And it makes me angrier. It makes me angrier. Rather, so it's about how, what we see, and then what we think about it, then produces what we feel about it. That's what I've kind of found.
Yes.
And so if I can check in with myself on, okay, what am I saying here?
Mhm.
I can shift how I'll feel about something. And so if something's happening in the house, um, my husband tends to speak very passionately about things, and sometimes it feels like he's yelling at me. And he's really just expressing what's going on for him. And it's me. I sometimes will take what he's saying as thinking I've done something wrong, I didn't quite support the project, or whatever. That's how it happened. And I just go, okay, I can think that, or I can just, and then I can't hear what he's saying when I do that.
Yep.
So, or I can hang in with the loudness of what's going on and just try to listen to what it is he's actually saying.
Yeah.
And I think that's a way of holding space for someone,
That's
you know?
great. So that's a great example because it kind of separates it out a little bit too. So, for instance, I think somebody could take that and use that just how you said. So when your stuff starts to come up and you think, "Oh, this is about me," or "I didn't do something right," that you kind of acknowledge that that's there, but then you kind of
Yeah,
hold it and set it, almost take it and set it aside. Don't let it escalate. Don't get caught up in it, right? Don't let your thinking get absorbed in that. But say, okay,
yeah.
notice that that's there. Put it aside. Go back. Bring your attention back to the other person and where they are at, where they're going. Let them do what they're doing. Let them, you're holding space so that they can just be sharing, right?
Right. And recognize that it is just a sharing. Now,
Yeah.
he's very good at that, and he doesn't intend to cause guilt and blame. Not everybody is. So there's a place where I can say to myself that I can trust him, that he's not really blaming me, that that's really more my issue.
Yeah.
So there's a space has been created there with time in the relationship, knowing that he doesn't typically blame me.
Yeah.
He typically is very gracious about trying to find ways to not blame and not use you did this kind of language. So that does make it more possible, I think, to hold sacred space for someone.
Hmm.
Their behavior is a part of the equation of whether I can hold sacred space for another person, whether
Absolutely.
it's my husband or sister or whatever. Um, yeah,
Okay. So when we're thinking about, yeah, holding that sacred space, there's a piece of the puzzle where you're trusting the other person. What I heard you saying was, I think, You're trusting the other person's intentions. So even if their behavior may seem a little wild or passionate or even a little frightening to you because you're not sure exactly where they're coming from, you trust
Yeah.
the intention that's going on over
Yes.
there. And
Right.
if you didn't, let's say you didn't, or you felt like uncertain about what, if there was something else going on, because sometimes we do tune into that, or if somebody's stuck in a pattern where they're not trusting the intention. How,
Yeah.
so with the next, I would think the next step would be, okay, you let them kind of do their thing, hold their space, and then it's time for you to ask for kind of your turn. So
Yeah.
decide your part, right? Where you had
Mhm.
your feelings or your thoughts or whatever, and
Yeah.
it's still there, it didn't really go away and you're wondering about it, right?
Hmm.
Hmm.
So it's interesting that if I once I have acknowledged that something is my feelings, if it is with a person I'm trusting that their intention is okay, and I go back and actually hear what they're saying, it will usually give me information about what's going on for them. And I can be more present with what is going on for them, and I can kind of drop or let go of what I was my reaction was because it wasn't actually real.
Mm.
I mean, it was a real feeling, but I've already spoken with myself about it, not about it actually being my issues and not and my stuff coming up. And what I want to do is actually hear what the other person is saying. And when I allow myself, like you said, to sort of set aside my personal judgments or fears or doubts about myself, and then I can hear them, then then it's really interesting because it's usually something that's really bearing something about them. Like it's actually quite often an intimate thing that they're sharing, their own fears, their own doubts, their own um, feeling like they didn't do the job well enough or whatever. And so I tend to be able to go into that place. And I don't always have something that I need to say. But you did ask about, okay, what if you have something you need and how do you ask for your needs to get met or how do we work together? And I think that is a good exploration because I'm still exploring that. I'm aware that I can satisfy my own needs, and yet I want to have a relationship that is real. So it's like, how do we want to see this? Like, how much time do we, having some conversations about how much time do we need to be on our own? How much time, do we want to do our work together? What parts of our work do we want to do together? We happen to have a company together, so there's a lot of living and working together time.
Sure.
And so negotiating a little bit about that and then just being free enough to say, let's just try this and let's come back to talking about it later. That's one way I think to help me get my needs met is in just a really and just, candid conversations and then saying, okay, is it going to be okay to bring this up? Because it's like creating permission. Is it going to be okay to bring this up in a week and look at it again? If it doesn't have to work this way, let's find a way that does work. There's a lot of language that can really be helpful rather than thinking that there's only one way to do it right. And
Great. That's
I
that's
just
great. That's really powerful. I mean, I think that people
uh,
need to hear that because I think you can't. Part of us is, I'm thinking about our conversation. I don't want you to lose your train of thought, but I'm thinking about how powerful this is because I feel like in a lot of ways we're redefining relationship. And
yeah,
it's taking it out of the places that we've been conditioned to be in relationship, and we're
yeah,
redefining it in how is relationship when both people feel strong and powerful and comfortable in themselves. What does relationship look like then, right?
yeah,
um,
right.
it's different.
And when you've really released some of those cords of codependency that say you need to do this for me, and in trade I'll do this for you. So it's like, okay, if you support me, this would be a traditional women masculine feminine thing. If you support me, I will cook all your food and clean your stuff. If you tell me that you won't abandon me or give me that, then I'll give you, that I think you're the greatest guy in the world or, whatever. There's these little sort of, codependent threads. And when you start to release those and you start to go, well, okay, what's relationship then?
Mhm.
But if you really can consciously release those, you come into a different place of being together because if you have released those, you're beginning to take responsibility for yourself. And I think that creates an environment where you can ask for things in a different way. I think asking for something and feeling bad if it doesn't happen isn't, or being so attached to getting something,
Hmm.
it can be a problem also. Like if I say I really want to be able to, for me it would be like I really want to be able to work out every morning before I start work. Okay, well, we live in a couple different cities, we're on the road, we're here, we're there. I can't really expect him to support that and help me make it happen. Because for me, I've found, because it's like throwing the cards up in the air. It's like, how am I going to do that?
Yeah.
Um, or there may be something that he wants that's in direct conflict, like conflict with what you're trying to.
What you were saying, which was so powerful, was the idea of learning the language of negotiating and wondering how can we make this work. It's like a big wondering language that we're not used to, really.
Yeah, it's like a meandering language.
Yeah.
And it's like an openness sort of language versus what I think most of us grew up with,
Yeah.
in my family anyway, was more of an industrial relationship. I would say industrial because um, conversations needed to be efficient, like time efficient.
Yeah.
They had a right and a wrong answer. There was the one best way. I remember my father always had the one best way to do something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in reality, that's a crazy, um, energetically locking up kind of way to live, to think that there's only one right way to do the dishes, even. Um, there's not. There's a million ways. And one person I liked, I was listening to, what is his name? The Seven Behaviors of Effective People.
Stephen Covey.
And
Yep.
what do you have his name?
Stephen Covey.
Stephen Covey, yeah. And he said, be efficient with things.
Mm.
Like, okay, I'm going to get the dishes done or whatever. Be efficient with things. Be effective with people. And so I think the difference for me is this: if the efficiency was so ground in our really, in what I would call our industrial sort of upbringing, where time is money, where you have to produce a lot in a short period of time. The more you can produce, the better you are. If you're not producing, you're not of value. That's the industrial mode.
Yeah.
And I think what we're finding is that crushes people. We put everybody through the same high school or same school program, same school system, when they have widely different ways of approaching the world, but we narrow it down into this one because it's efficient
Yes.
education. It's not effective for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So it's about when you start looking at being effective, when you start feeling that I want both of us to come out feeling good. I want whatever we find to fit and work for both of us and to affirm the individuals that we are. Then you're looking at a whole different thing. And so becoming conscious of the little pieces of the old industrial model and recognizing, these just don't work very well. If I have to be right and you have to be wrong, which is part of that industrial model, is competition,
Yes.
that I have to be better than you, smarter than you, quicker than you, whatever. If we're in that, that's a very destructive mode for relationship. But I remember living in that in my first relationship. I remember when he did something wrong, my first husband, if he did something wrong I would let him know. And I would let him know that I would never do that and that I was definitely better than him. And better, notch up the effort in the relationship, or he would lose it. Now that's all of those pieces are, I think, industrial age modeling of our parents, possibly. Everybody had different parents, so that's hard to say. But when we get stressed, we can fall into those. And so recognizing when we get stressed, what are those pieces that we fall back into, or what are we doing currently in the relationship that is actually squeezing and strangling that person and is not going to work?